Let's go back to something we were supposed to do in the last hour, looking at the main stories this weekend. We got Femi and Lettice joining me for that. Good evening to you both.
Evening.
Hello.
How are you guys doing?
Good.
Not too bad.
Hope you're having a better weekend than I am. Like I said, the gremlins are coming for me. Cool, blimey. Let's start by taking a look. Let's talk Dominic Raab, shall we, Femi? So he has had allegations of bullying against him, and the investigation's going on into that. While that's going on, he's still working as the Deputy Prime Minister for the Tory party. In the meantime, apparently there have been other civil servants who wanted to also make complaints but didn't. So pressure really piling on the Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, yeah, I mean, if there are already 24 complaints as well at the last count, more complaints against him it's getting to be a bit of a joke at this point. Well, it's been there for a while. I mean, we are playing a game of musical cabinet and have been for the past few years. First, it was Gavin Williamson who had to resign for telling a civil servant to slit their own throats. You've had Suella Braverman break ministerial code by essentially leaking documents and using them inappropriately. But she resigned for I think 4 days, or maybe a week, I forget. But then she got put back into cabinet. Then we've got Nadeem Zahawi, who essentially broke tax law by not paying his bill, not paying his taxes, and having to pay, I think it was a £4.3 million fine, which is essentially money that he tried to take from the public purse during a financial crisis. So not a great guy. And Rishi Sunak knew about that from last July when we all read that he was being investigated, and chose to only sack him now when the pressure piled on him. It is utterly pathetic. And now we've got Dominic Raab as well.
Lettice, what do you think, not just about Dominic Raab's investigation, but as Femi is saying, it seems to be a number of Tory MPs, and this is actually under Rishi Sunak, who talks about coming in, being a leader of integrity. Yeah. This isn't all looking really good for our current Prime Minister, is it?
No, not at all. We seem to be back in sort of the sleaze scandal, two in it was only last week that he had to sack Nadeem Zahawi. And I think the longer that Rishi Sunak holds out on this, the worse it is going to be. I was reading the Times newspaper earlier today, and they have a poll on their website at the moment saying, should Dominic Raab be removed from office? And 86% of Times readers believe that he should be.
Oh, really?
When all these readers on the paper that was actually backing Rishi for leader are saying that, you need to start listening. And I think this is going to be tougher for Rishi because Raab has been a long supporter of him. Back when it was the leadership campaign with Liz Truss,
he headed it up.
Stood by his side. He was very loyal, and in return, Raab got his position back essentially. And so Rishi doesn't want to get rid of him, but the longer that he holds on to this, it's becoming inevitability right now.
What do you think all of this does say about the Tory party right now? Not just about the Tory party, but also about Rishi Sunak's power, if you like, over the party. Many people, Sir Keir Starmer leading the way in this, calling him effectively quite weak. He needs to make sure his backbenchers are happy. And the more people he sacks, he's risking more people being added to the unhappy backbenchers list.
Yeah, I mean, it's 100% not looking good, and it's definitely not looking like he has any control of his party at the moment. Jake Berry coming out and doing that interview, essentially saying that he should be suspended, it shows there's no loyalty in the Conservative Party anymore, and these divisions are running deep. They're throwing each other under the bus. It's also very sort of suspicious, the language that he is using at the moment, sort of talking about him not being, formally told about this, but so that perhaps that he did know about this and that this is just a continuing thing. That the culture that we're seeing in politics and significantly within the Conservative Party is just so disappointing at the moment, and I think it's outrageous.
Femi, if you do look at everything we're talking about when it comes to the Tory party, Rishi Sunak looking ahead to the next general election, could be next year. Looking at the polls, yes, Labour, Keir Starmer doing well, but surely with all of this, you would expect him and Labour to be doing far, far more better than they are. Are they really a party? Is Sir Keir Starmer really a Prime Minister in waiting?
Keir Starmer, I'd say he's a caretaker or a placeholder in waiting. in the sense that he's doing all that he can to just go right down the middle, not offend anybody, not really take too many positions, just try and be the center ground politics of, I'll go with what I think is the safest option for go with. It's just the people have faith in me that I'm not going to do the crazy stuff that the Tories have been doing for the last 7 years. I think that's his main aim. And as a result, people are begrudgingly saying, all right, well, at least he's better than the Tories, even though he's not actually doing anything that someone could even come close to calling progressive or left wing. I mean, his party last year voted to have a voting system in the UK that actually treats all votes equally, whereas right now they currently don't. Proportional representation is what we're looking for. If you look at the last election, Tory votes, if you compare seats to votes, were 30% more than Labour votes and 18 times more than Green votes. And that's what progressive people in this country want. The majority of people want a new voting system. And Keir Starmer's just saying, no, status quo, let's just stick with that. And so it's essentially cowardice preventing him from doing better than he currently is.
Lettice, let's talk about the former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. I got to say, I got to give props to Nadine Dorries actually getting Boris Johnson as her first guest on her show. However, when it looks like, maybe if you might see a remorseful Boris Johnson, maybe taking a little bit of responsibility over Partygate, we did not get that.
No, not at all. And you say props to Nadine for getting this, but quite frankly, I think this is 100% his choice. He's chosen to do it with Nadine, who is a very close friend, where he could clearly largely decide the narrative. And it was very obvious from the outset of this interview that she was very much on his side. There were quotes which were so cringeworthy from her about his powerful articles that he had written, and saying later to her panel that he was being very modest about his impact in persuading others to send arms to Ukraine. It was just so sort of obvious she was on his side. In regard to the Partygate discussion that they had, which was clearly his way of just showing his defence, I can't quite believe we are back here having this conversation, not least because of the evidence that is mounted against him. He was fined for Partygate. There were photos released of him leaving a party in November 2020 of one of these Partygate parties. There have been accounts of there being sick on the walls at these parties. So no matter how much you deny there being parties, you would probably notice a weird smell in your workplace going after. I just think that ignorance is no defence in this case.
Do we have a clip of Boris Johnson talking to Nadine about Partygate? Could we love it? Okay. Let's listen to the man himself and what exactly he had to say. As Lettice is saying, no responsibility. If anything, you know what he said? I can't say much because there's another investigation still going on. I don't know why it's taking so long, but the investigation is still going on.
There's always an investigation going on.
Indeed. However, he said he can't say too much, but he will say this. Have a listen.
But I just repeat what I've said before, and I hope is obvious to everybody that anybody who thinks I was knowingly going to parties that were breaking lockdown rules in Number 10, and then knowingly covering up parties that were illicit, that were other people going to, that's all strictly for the birds. If anybody thinks that they're out of their mind, I've got to wait for this thing to conclude. And what I would say is that we all thought what we were doing, or certainly I thought what we were doing, was within the rules.
So, Femi, he kind of turned into Shaggy. I didn't do it. Do you know what I mean? That's the vibe I'm getting. That's what I'm seeing. And it's extraordinary because even now, even since him getting the PC and being fined, since obviously this has all come out, there's still investigations and there's still stuff coming out, including one whistleblower saying and quoting the former Prime Minister as saying this is the least social distanced gathering ever, or something to that effect. And I just say you did it. Just hold your hands up and let's move on. But I do feel the more he denies it, the more he gets people's back up, and we're back there and talking about it and saying, hey, this isn't necessarily completely accurate.
Yeah, I mean, we're going around the roundabouts with this because we heard every excuse under the rainbow. We heard We heard he was ambushed by cake. We heard I didn't realize it was a party. We heard that all the rules were followed. We're hearing
exactly.
now.
Say that. Say all of that. Say I didn't realise. I didn't know, but I hold my hands up. It was a gathering. I just didn't understand it or appreciate it. We've been there. Honestly, we've all probably been there over what happened in lockdown.
But that's not an excuse. Like, he was literally the person telling people what they could and couldn't do. People that couldn't see their dying relatives. I mean, I'm watching a show. I mean, there are many people that didn't get to say goodbye to their loved ones, and he was at parties like the Bring Your Own Booze party. He knew that it's absolutely rubbish to suggest he didn't know he was breaking the rules. And even if he was wrong, this is the important thing. Even if he was wrong and didn't know, he's the one who explained the rules. So it means if he was explaining things wrongly and setting rules that were inconsistent with his own understanding of those rules, he was utterly reckless and incompetent during that pandemic. And if you look at the fact that we've now got 217,000 deaths, at last I recall, that's a lot of responsibility on his head. And let's not draw the line under Boris Johnson. But Rishi Sunak, our current Prime Minister, also got fined because he was breaking the rules.
He's got more fines than Boris Johnson right now when it comes to being fined as a Prime Minister, or indeed Rishi before he was Prime Minister when he was Chancellor. But you do have to give Boris Johnson some fair dues in terms of some of his role as Prime Minister, and he spoke about this with Nadine as well. Come on, the vaccine rollout, that was world leading.
Sorry, the vaccine was invented by Oxford University scientists.
Funded by the UK. Come on, it was America, and even for the UK, because we're not the powerhouse UK once was.
Funded by our taxes.
But Boris Johnson have to invest so much, and the rollout as well. It was incredible, no?
He didn't invest anything. It's not his money. It's our money that goes into this. Our money going to fund the very experts he spent the previous 4 years saying we shouldn't be listening to. The idea that he can be credited with this, and he repeated the line in the interview yesterday about how we can thank Brexit for this, even though the UK regulator, said that we approved the vaccine under EU rules. The idea that the EU would have stopped us buying stuff when Slovakia and Hungary bought Russian vaccines that the EU hadn't approved and rolled them out no problem. Not to mention the fact that the European Medicines Agency, or the EU Medicines Agency, says they don't control which medicines individual countries buy and roll out. So he was just spewing lies again. It is round and round the roses with this guy.
Lettice, what do you think? Do you think Boris Johnson does deserve praise for the vaccine roll? And also, Femi's right, Boris Johnson did also speak about us being out of the EU, which allowed the vaccine to be rolled out at that greater speed. I've got to say, Femi, there were other nations that wasn't quite as quick, and there were issues surrounding the fact that they were part of the EU. But yes, Lettice, what do you think?
No, I do think he deserves a bit of credit for the vaccine rollout, actually. I think that we did get many more vaccines much faster on than many other European countries because of the manoeuvres that were in place when he was leading the government, and because we put that first forward. But I think that also there are things in Ukraine that were done by the UK. The UK led the way in those relations that we can praise him for. I don't think he deserves all negative criticism for his whole premiership. We forget that it was him who won this highest mandate that we've seen in 30 years. So he does deserve a bit of praise. Yes, there were definitely things that went wrong. And I think Partygate, it was just a complete car crash. And I think that that's where a lot of this blame lies. And it did lead to his downfall. He didn't even last 2 years really in the role, or just over.
Oh, it was sad. Yeah, it was sad that somebody who wanted that role so much, and he did not want to go. He loved it, and it was just so sad to see that he was pushed out the way he was. But I always feel sorry for people when they get sacked or they're removed. Sorry, Femi, go on.
Yeah. As I said, the UK regulator approved the vaccine under EU rules, which gave us the head start, which is why we were ahead of other countries in terms of rolling out the vaccine towards the start. Those European countries then overtook us, which was the important bit. Yes, we were faster at the start, but by the end we were behind. So the vaccine rollout started under EU rules. That gave us our head start. As for Boris Johnson's general legacy, right now the UK is facing the worst fall in living standards on record, according to the government's own experts. And we've now got strikes across the place. And it says the estimates say that it would cost about 23 billion in government money in order to pay people in line with inflation. Well, guess what? Us coming out of the EU, according to the government's own experts, it cost the UK government about 40 billion in tax revenue. So we could pay almost double what it would cost to get the strikes over with if we hadn't left the EU. In fact, they could do that now.
I don't think we can put all of that on leaving the EU. I think we've also got to consider the fact that we were in
40 billion on it.
We were in COVID, and that cost $500 million in terms of our debt. That is what is causing our cost of living crisis at the moment, not just in the UK, but globally.
The numbers I just mentioned, specifically that 40 billion, is specifically money that is lost from UK tax revenue because of the damage done to our economy. That's according to the government's own experts. So if we had that extra 40 billion and the 23 billion it would cost to pay people in line with inflation, we could pay that a lot more easily.
I got to say, Lettice, we are, in terms of our European counterparts and even America, we're far behind, economically speaking, than them. Could Brexit be the difference? But really quickly, I want to talk about China, particularly a balloon which claimed to be over America from China and causing all sorts of diplomatic issues between the US and China. Femi, what can you tell us about that?
That China, it might be kind of like them flexing their muscles, especially given the issues around Taiwan. I'm not entirely sure.
They deny it. Yeah, they deny it, Lettice. They're saying that this is it could be Chinese made, as in somebody in China, but nothing to do with the government.
Yeah, which is clearly a straight lie, to be honest. Even America has come out and said they know that this is a straight lie. I find it particularly odd. Balloons are one of the sort of oldest forms of surveillance technology, but there have been some analysts and experts in this space saying that these sort of spy balloons, as they are making a comeback, because they're quite hard to detect on surveillance technology because they're very low to zero emissions on them. They're also lighter than potentially launching a satellite. And also you can change their orbit. As we've seen on this particular balloon, it's making a particular trajectory over a lot of special sites in the US, including military bases. I am very shocked the US hasn't done more to take it down at this point, saying that only in a few days it'll leave US airspace. But, you know, a few days, who knows what it's actually tracking up to that point. So I think,
it's nuts, shocking. Particularly given that we still haven't really held China to account as to how it is something like COVID even came about. Not blaming Chinese people, but the Chinese government, what was going on, we still don't know. Might never know. Lettice and Femi, so good talking to you both. Thanks so much for joining me this afternoon.